You are standing at the edge of a world on the brink. It's March 27th, 1945, and the relentless machinery of war grinds on. But tonight, in the vital Shimonoseki Strait, a new, chilling chapter begins to unfold. Imagine the scene. A duty officer at Moji Naval Base, his eyes strained by the dim light, records observations in his logbook. His pen scratches out words so damning, so utterly demoralizing, that if discovered by the feared Kempitai military police, they would earn him a court-martial for defeatism. The ships are vanishing, he writes, the tremor in his hand barely perceptible. Not to bombs we can see, not to submarines we can hunt, but to something invisible beneath our own waters. This wasn't a nightmare. It was reality. Moments before, through the grimy panes of his observation post, he had witnessed a spectacle that defied military doctrine, an act of destruction that tore at the very fabric of comprehension. 3 fully laden cargo vessels, vital lifelines for a starving nation, gone. In just 12 minutes. No enemy aircraft streaking across the moonlit sky. No telltale glint of a periscope. No foaming wakes of torpedoes closing in. Just sudden, earth-shattering explosions, tearing colossal holes in steel hulls, sending thousands of tons of desperately needed rice, coal, and raw materials plummeting to the ocean floor. The sheer, terrifying randomness of it all would have sent shivers down the spine of even the most hardened sailor. How do you fight an enemy you cannot see, cannot track, cannot even comprehend? This was the beginning of Japan's unseen undoing, a silent, insidious war waged from beneath the waves, orchestrated by an enemy who had mastered the art of economic strangulation. For the past 72 hours, the Shimonoseki Strait, Japan's crucial maritime artery, a narrow passage connecting the Sea of Japan to the inland sea, had been transformed into an unforgiving graveyard for merchant vessels. Before this, it was a bustling highway, a symbol of Japan's industrial might and its desperate struggle to feed its people. Now, it was a death trap. That particular night, 102 Boeing B-29 superfortresses had visited the strait, but they weren't carrying their usual devastating cargo of incendiary bombs, the infernal rain that had turned cities like Tokyo into raging infernos. These aircraft, under the personal command of Brigadier General John H. Davies of the 313th Bombardment Wing, carried something far more insidious, far more patient, and ultimately far more destructive. They carried thousands of 12,000-pound mines, each equipped with a terrifying triumvirate of magnetic, acoustic, and pressure detonators. These were not mere explosives. They were sophisticated instruments of economic warfare, devices designed to transform Japan's own coastal waters into her greatest, most relentless enemy. What the naval observers on the ground didn't know, what the entire Japanese high command wouldn't fully grasp for weeks, was that this night marked the beginning of Operation Starvation, the most devastating yet least visible campaign of the entire Pacific War. The mathematics of Japan's defeat, a grim calculus of national collapse, were being inscribed not in the dramatic, fiery devastation over urban centers, but in the silent, unseen destruction of ships carrying the very essence of survival, the rice that fed 72 million Japanese, the coal that fueled their industries, the raw materials that sustained their war machine. It was a crisis that had been meticulously planned, slowly building since January 1945, though its strategic roots stretched back years into the early days of the war. Admiral Chester Nimitz, the revered commander-in-chief of the U.S. Pacific Fleet, had long been a vocal advocate for aerial mining of Japanese waters. His naval officers possessed an acute understanding that initially eluded the Army Air Forces. Japan, a densely populated island nation, was staggeringly vulnerable. Importing 88% of its oil, 24% of its food, and virtually all of its crucial raw materials, Japan was a nation that could be strangled more effectively by mines than by bombs. The logic was cold, hard, and undeniable. It was a strategy not of blunt force but of precision, patience, and economic attrition. Among those who grasped this profound truth was Commander Ellis A. Johnson, a brilliant former Carnegie Institute scientist who had been temporarily assigned to the Army Air Forces. His calculations, presented to Major General Curtis LeMay in January 1945, were staggering in their simplicity and devastating in their implications. He projected that one mine for every 21 dropped would find a target, a stark contrast to the less efficient one submarine-launched mine in 12. But the real game-changer was the delivery method. B-29s could deliver mines in quantities that submarines could never hope to match, thousands in a single night. This wasn't just an improvement. It was a revolution in naval warfare, turning long-range bombers into silent, invisible killers of shipping. Post-war interrogations, meticulously recorded by the U.S. Strategic Bombing Survey, revealed the tragic irony of Japan's preparedness. The Imperial Japanese Navy, despite its formidable reputation, possessed 349 mine-sweeping vessels and 20,000 trained personnel, all under the command of Captain Kuzo Tamura, the nation's foremost mine warfare expert. They were a dedicated force, brave and skilled, but they were equipped for the wrong war. Their magnetic sweeps could barely reach 10 meters above the seabed, rendering them useless against mines planted deeper. Their acoustic countermeasures were rudimentary, often consisting of little more than simple noise bombs, utterly outmatched by American sophistication. And, crucially, they had no defense whatsoever against the pressure-sensitive mines, devices that detected the subtle water displacement of a passing ship, operating on a principle the Japanese had yet to master. It was like fighting a modern jet fighter with a biplane. The technological disparity was simply too vast. The first true shock, a harbinger of the slow, agonizing strangulation to come, arrived on the night of March 27th. According to Japanese naval records captured after the war, radar operators at Moji Naval Base watched in disbelief as B-29s, usually associated with high-altitude bombing runs over cities, flew precise, deliberate patterns over the open water. They were dropping their invisible cargo into specific, predetermined coordinates within the strait. By dawn, the grim tally began. 18 ships, representing an immense loss of cargo and life, had failed to emerge from that narrow, now treacherous passage. The 2-week period immediately following March 27th brought the second, even more terrifying phase of Japan's maritime catastrophe. The esteemed proceedings of the U.S. Naval Institute recounted the fate of the destroyer Yukikaze, a vessel that had defied death, surviving every major naval battle of the war, a ghost of the imperial fleet. Now it found itself ignominiously trapped in port. Its captain, a man who had faced down countless enemy fleets, unwilling to risk his ship and crew against an unseen, omnipresent minefield. The irony was devastating. The Americans had unleashed death that could not be seen, could not be found, and, crucially, could not be fought. Japanese sweepers toiled from dawn to dusk, their efforts heroic but futile. Yet, each night, more ships vanished. The mines, with their advanced programming, seemed to have a terrifying intelligence. Some exploded immediately, tearing apart their unsuspecting victims. Others waited days, learning patterns, observing the rhythm of Japanese shipping, patiently biding their time. The mining runs themselves were a testament to American ingenuity and the B-29's capabilities. Individual B-29 superfortresses, flying singly or in small groups under the cover of night, operated at moderately low altitudes. Their sophisticated radar systems provided precise mine release information, ensuring accuracy even in the darkest, most inclement weather. This approach made them incredibly difficult to track, a stark contrast to the massive bombing formations that descended upon Japanese cities. They flew at altitudes of 5,000 to 8,000 feet, low enough for pinpoint accuracy in their drops, yet high enough to evade the majority of Japan's increasingly depleted anti-aircraft defenses. It was a perfect blend of stealth, precision, and overwhelming destructive power. Technical reports submitted to the Strategic Bombing Survey after the war underscored the profound technological chasm between the two nations. Japanese engineers, upon examining recovered mines, were stunned. 6 different types of triggers, operating in complex combinations, revealed a level of sophistication years ahead of their own capabilities. Magnetic sensors meticulously detected steel hulls, capable of distinguishing subtle variations. Acoustic devices, far from simple noise detectors, could hear specific engine frequencies, propeller noises, and even the vibration of a ship's hull, rendering crude Japanese noise bombs utterly useless. Pressure mechanisms were so finely tuned they could detect the minute water displacement of a passing ship, making them practically invisible to traditional sweeping methods. And then there were the truly insidious innovations. Some mines combined all 3 sensor types, creating a multi-layered defense. Others were programmed to count ships before detonating, creating deadly patterns that defied prediction. Some waited days, even weeks, before arming themselves, turning supposedly clear channels into delayed death traps. This randomness, this unpredictability, transformed every single voyage into a terrifying game of Russian roulette. Consider the harrowing incident of April 2, 1945, in Kobe Harbor. According to Joint Army-Navy Assessment Committee records, the 6,000-ton freighter Yamashiro Maru, laden with Manchurian soybeans, cautiously entered what had been officially confirmed as a swept channel. The vessel drew 26 feet of water, well within the safe parameters verified by minesweepers that very morning. At 08:32 hours, the unthinkable happened. An M11 pressure mine, meticulously dropped 6 days earlier and fiendishly programmed to ignore the first 3 ships passing overhead, detonated directly beneath the engine room. The explosion was cataclysmic. Official casualty reports indicate only 12 survivors from a crew of 53. The Yamashiro Maru and its vital cargo plunged to the seabed in just 4 minutes. The water, a testament to the sudden brutal chaos, was choked with soybean paste and drowning men. The aftermath was immediate and devastating. Shipping through Kobe, once Japan's busiest port, declined by a staggering 85%, from 320,000 tons in March to a paltry 44,000 tons in July. The bustling port that had once handled more cargo than any other Japanese facility became a maritime ghost town. Ships, those symbols of national survival, accumulated in anchorages, their captains, now deeply scarred by the unseen terror, steadfastly refusing to enter the hazardous port. And while the ships sat idle, their precious food cargoes rotted on the docks, unseen by the starving cities just miles inland. By mid-April, within the first month of Operation Starvation, U.S. Navy analysis indicated that 113 Japanese merchant ships had struck mines and sank in the strait, representing a horrifying 9% of Japan's already dwindling merchant fleet. The 600-meter-wide passage, through which 70,000 tons of cargo had once flowed daily, was reduced to a mere trickle, a choked artery in the nation's failing circulatory system. The ripple effect of this unseen blockade permeated every facet of Japanese life, touching the lives of ordinary citizens in profoundly painful ways. Intercepted Japanese communications, decoded by Allied intelligence, painted a stark picture of industrial paralysis. Munitions factories in Tokyo reported, "No coal for the factories today. Ships cannot get through from Kyushu." The very engines of war were sputtering to a halt. This industrial collapse was compounded by a growing food crisis. The domestic rice crop was disastrous, the worst since 1910, exacerbated by an already dwindling labor force. Combined with the relentless mining blockade that prevented vital food imports, Japan faced a catastrophe of biblical proportions. Daily rice rations in major cities, once a meager 350 grams, plummeted to 250 grams, then to nothing but a desperate mixture of sweet potatoes and sawdust extended flour. People were literally eating wood to survive. Even fishing boats, humble vessels previously beneath the military's notice, became unsuspecting victims of this invisible war. Naval records chillingly document the fate of the 30-ton Fukuju Maru, which triggered an acoustic mine in Osaka Bay, claiming the lives of 7 fishermen. Their crime? The frequency of their diesel engines, a common sound in a fishing fleet, tragically matched that of a destroyer, fooling the mine's sophisticated sensor. Even wooden-hulled vessels, seemingly immune to magnetic mines, were not safe. The omnipresent danger extended to them as well, as magnetic mines could still detect their steel engine blocks, anchors, and fittings. It was a war without sanctuary, a terror without distinction. According to a grim report submitted to Imperial General Headquarters and later captured by Allied forces, Japanese analysts calculated that at current loss rates, Japan would have no merchant fleet whatsoever by November 1945. The report's conclusion was stark, concise, and utterly heartbreaking. We are not being defeated. We are being starved. The numbers, when viewed in retrospect, tell a harrowing story of systematic annihilation, a nation slowly bleeding out. In March 1945, just before the full force of the mining campaign was unleashed, Japan still managed to move 545,000 tons of cargo through her major ports. By April, this figure had fallen dramatically to 381,000 tons. May witnessed a further precipitous drop to only 209,000 tons. And by June, the nation managed a paltry 98,000 tons. Each one of those lost tons represented food for desperate civilians, coal for struggling factories, or oil for a military already stretched to its breaking point. At the Yawata Steelworks, Japan's largest producer, production plummeted by an astonishing 85%, not from direct bombing, but from the simple, crushing lack of coal and iron ore. The colossal facility that had once forged steel for battleships and tanks now stood eerily idle, its massive furnaces cold, its once thriving workforce dismissed to the countryside in a desperate, often futile, search for food. The human cost manifested in the cruelest ways. According to medical records from the Japanese Ministry of Health, diseases of poverty, long thought banished, reappeared, diseases not seen since the Meiji era. Beriberi, caused by a dire lack of vitamins, weakened populations. Tuberculosis spread like wildfire through already compromised communities. Children suffered from kwashiorkor, their bellies grotesquely swollen with fluid while their bodies wasted away, tragic symbols of a nation starving from within. In a desperate attempt to counter the invisible threat, the Japanese Navy resorted to increasingly futile measures. Post-war testimony revealed the grim dispatch of suicide boats, manned by brave but doomed men, sent out to intentionally detonate mines, sacrificing lives in a desperate gamble. Wooden-hulled vessels, unsuited for the open sea, were pressed into service, their fragility offering little protection. Channels were declared clear with solemn pronouncements, only to claim more victims mere hours later, adding to the pervasive sense of dread. Captain Tamura, the nation's mine warfare expert, compiled a somber list of vessels lost to mines, submarines, and aircraft in the Pacific, noting that even with 349 vessels and 20,000 men dedicated to mine sweeping, the losses mounted relentlessly. By May 1945, the relentless, unseen nature of the threat had created a widespread psychological collapse among Japanese merchant crews. One Japanese officer, Commander Tada Kuwahara, chillingly recounted to Allied investigators after the war. It was difficult to obtain crews towards the end of the war. There was a great tendency for crews to jump ship. The terror was so profound, so all-encompassing, that according to records from the Japanese Shipping Control Authority, dozens of merchant captains openly refused to take their vessels out of port, choosing imprisonment or even potential execution over almost certain death at sea. The psychological impact rippled far beyond the mariners, seeping into the consciousness of coastal communities. Residents could witness ships exploding in waters that were supposedly safe, the blasts echoing across the bays. The randomness, the sheer helplessness against an enemy that could not be targeted, created a unique and pervasive terror, gnawing at the morale of an already beleaguered population. By June 1945, Japan's industrial economy had effectively ceased to function, a silent, almost imperceptible demise. The Kawasaki shipyards, once prodigious builders of submarines and destroyers, received no steel for 2 agonizing months. The Mitsubishi aircraft factories, once churning out the formidable new Raiden fighter, shut down completely for lack of aluminum. Even the sacred Yamato's sister ship, the incomplete aircraft carrier Shinano, a monument to a fading empire, sat rusting forlornly in dock, unable to be moved, without fuel, without steel to complete her. Coal, Japan's primary energy source, became critically scarce. The daily ship passage through the Shimonoseki Straits, once 70,000 tons in March, plummeted to 35,000 tons in April, then staggered down to a desperate 7,500 tons in May, and a catastrophic 750 tons in June. It struggled back up to 8,000 tons in July, only to drop to a mere 1,500 tons in August. Power plants across the country began to shut down, plunging entire prefectures into darkness, leaving millions without electricity, further crippling any semblance of normal life. In Osaka, once vibrant factories that had run 3 shifts a day now opened only sporadically, whenever a meager coal shipment arrived. Sometimes, once a week, often not at all. According to Japanese Railway Ministry records, the nation's locomotives, once the arteries of inland commerce, began burning desperate substitutes: furniture, precious books, even the gates of ancient Buddhist temples, all in a desperate attempt to keep the trains running. Without coal from Kyushu, a major industrial hub, the entire rail system was projected to grind to a halt within weeks. The mining campaign's impact on food distribution proved to be perhaps the most catastrophic blow. Japan had always relied heavily on maritime transport to move food from its agricultural regions to its teeming cities. With coastal shipping paralyzed, millions faced imminent starvation. Rationing records from the Tokyo metropolitan government paint a grim picture. Citizens waited up to 14 hours for rice rations that never came. The rice existed, just 200 kilometers away in Niigata, a short distance in peacetime. But no ships, now gripped by terror, would brave the mined waters to transport it. The chilling prediction by Allied intelligence was that up to 10 million Japanese would die of starvation by the end of winter in February 1946. Only Japan's unconditional surrender and the subsequent influx of American food aid averted this unthinkable catastrophe. The average civilian's caloric intake plummeted to a mere 200 calories daily by July 1945, a stark contrast to the 2,200 calories consumed before the war. Fishing villages, once self-sufficient communities, found their boats destroyed or confined to port, their livelihoods shattered. The Joint Army-Navy Assessment Committee documented the tragic fate of the 500-ton fishing vessel Taiyo Maru, attempting to feed Nagoya's desperate population, which triggered a mine just 3 miles from shore. 23 fishermen, men risking their lives to catch sardines in mined waters, perished. Korea, long Japan's conquered rice bowl, became utterly unreachable. The ports of Busan, Rashin, and Seashin, vital for importing Korean rice and Manchurian soybeans, were systematically mined. Ships that had plied the Korea-Japan run for decades now rusted in harbor, silent sentinels of a dying empire. Intercepted Japanese communications reveal the 8,000-ton cargo ship Chosen Maru's ill-fated attempt at the Busan run in June 1945. She carried desperately needed medicine for a typhoid outbreak in Seoul, intending to return with rice for Osaka. 16 miles from Busan, a magnetic mine tore the stern clean off. 43 crew members died. The 5,000 tons of rice, enough to feed Osaka for a week, sank in minutes, swallowed by the indifferent sea. The Korea Strait, a bustling thoroughfare for 50 ships daily according to pre-war manifests, saw traffic reduced to a mere 3 or 4 wooden vessels. The Japanese army in Korea, cut off from the homeland, began requisitioning food from Korean civilians, inadvertently sowing the seeds of famine there as well. Japan's industrial lifeline to Manchuria, the rich source of iron ore, coal, and soybeans, withered and died. Japanese customs records show that the port of Dairen, Manchuria's vital window to Japan, processed only 12,000 tons in July 1945, a catastrophic drop from 380,000 tons just a year earlier. Kwantung Army logistics reports, captured after the war, revealed mountains of resources in Manchuria: steel, coal, food, all rendered utterly useless because ships, their transport, simply wouldn't come. Those that attempted the perilous journey often never returned. The cascading consequences reverberated throughout Japan's already crippled war economy. According to the Strategic Bombing Survey, aircraft production, heavily dependent on Manchurian aluminum, plummeted by a staggering 91%. Tank production ceased entirely. Even basic ammunition became scarce as critical Manchurian lead and copper supplies were severed. The American mines represented a technological leap Japan simply couldn't match, a stark illustration of the uneven playing field of advanced warfare. The U.S. Navy's arsenal comprised 1,000 and 2,000-pound mines, equipped with an astonishing variety of fuse types. There was the magnetically detonated M9 Mod 1 and M11, designed to detect the metallic presence of a ship. The acoustically triggered A3, sensitive to propeller noise, and the A5, which reacted to ship hull noise, offered another layer of detection. And then there was the pressure-sensitive A6, a silent, deadly hunter that sensed the subtle changes in water pressure as a vessel passed overhead. Japanese naval engineers, meticulously examining recovered mines, as detailed in their technical reports, found a technology so far ahead of their capabilities it must have felt like science fiction. Magnetic sensors that could differentiate between ship types, acoustic devices that expertly ignored rudimentary Japanese countermeasures, and pressure sensors so sensitive they could detect the displacement of a mere rowboat. The ship count mechanisms, in particular, instilled a paralyzing frustration in Japanese sweepers. A mine might ignore the first 5 ships, seemingly a dud, only to destroy the 6th, turning what was thought to be a clear channel into a sudden death trap. Some mines armed themselves days after being laid. Others waited weeks. This engineered randomness made every single voyage a terrifying game of chance, fueling the widespread psychological collapse among merchant crews. The B-29's AAPQ-13 radar system was the silent partner in this devastating operation, allowing for precision mining even in the darkest nights and the foulest weather. Intercepted Japanese communications captured the bewildered observations of their personnel, who simply could not comprehend how American aircraft were dropping mines so precisely into their shipping channels on overcast nights. This technological superiority extended even to mine assembly. In less than 6 months, Mine Assembly Depot No. 4, staffed by just 12 officers and 171 men, loaded 13,090 mines into the lumbering superfortresses, offering some 200 possible combinations of triggers and delays. Each minefield was custom-tailored, meticulously designed to counteract specific Japanese sweeping techniques, ensuring the Americans stayed consistently one step ahead of their beleaguered enemy. Japan's once formidable submarine fleet, her last remaining offensive naval capability, found itself ironically imprisoned in home waters. Japanese naval records reveal that the I-58, the very submarine that would later sink the USS Indianapolis in a final tragic act of the war, spent 3 agonizing months trapped in Kure Harbor, its captain unwilling to risk the omnipresent minefields. Vice Admiral Teo Takagi, commanding Japan's 6th Fleet submarines, relayed a grim report to Imperial Naval Headquarters. "Our submarines cannot deploy. The Americans have turned our own bases into prisons." Even the majestic battleship Yamato, on her desperate, suicidal run to Okinawa in April, was forced to use the longer, more exposed Bungo Strait instead of the more convenient Shimonoseki Passage. This diverted route inadvertently exposed her to American reconnaissance aircraft, sealing her fate and leading directly to her destruction by carrier aircraft. The invisible mines had, in an unexpected twist of fate, indirectly claimed the world's largest battleship. Japan's mine-sweeping forces, initially brimming with confidence in their established protocols, gradually, painfully, realized their utter impotence. Their magnetic sweep cables, limited to a shallow 10 meters above the seabed, were useless against mines cunningly laid in deeper waters. Their acoustic countermeasures, simple noisemakers designed for a simpler enemy, were laughably ineffective against the sophisticated American acoustic sensors. Japanese mine-sweeping records from May 15th recount a particularly harrowing incident. The minesweeper W-22 detonated a mine while sweeping, killing 18 crew members. The vessel had been diligently using all prescribed countermeasures, magnetic cables deployed, noisemakers operating, traveling at a safe, cautious speed. But the mine, programmed with insidious intelligence, ignored the standard sweeping signatures, waiting instead for the actual ship itself. It was a cruel, agonizing game of cat and mouse where the mouse never stood a chance. Captain Tamura himself, in a candid post-war interrogation, admitted the sobering truth. The result of B-29 mining was so effective against the shipping that it eventually starved the country, adding with a chilling clarity, it was a far-sighted policy. The numbers achieved by Operation Starvation defied pre-war projections, demonstrating an almost unbelievable efficiency. The 20th Air Force flew 1,129 sorties, laying 12,135 mines in 26 fields across 46 separate missions. Crucially, this vital mining effort demanded only 5.7% of the 21st Bomber Command's total successful sorties, and a mere 15 B-29s were lost in the entire campaign. In return for this remarkably low cost, the mines sank or damaged 670 ships, totaling more than 250,000 tons. This staggering figure exceeded the combined total of all other causes, submarines, carrier aircraft, and surface vessels, during the same period. The efficiency was, quite simply, breathtaking. Each B-29 lost in the mining effort cost Japan roughly 45 ships. By comparison, the submarine force, despite its celebrated successes and the romanticized tales of wolf packs, required 190 submarines to sink 114 ships throughout the entire war, an average of 6.92 ships per submarine. The 40 B-29s dedicated to mining, however, averaged an astonishing 7.08 ships destroyed per aircraft in just 5 months. It was a statistical testament to the devastating power of unseen warfare. But behind these stark statistics lay a human tragedy of immense scale, a silent suffering largely unacknowledged in the annals of war. According to the Japanese Seamen's Union post-war records, merchant marine casualties exceeded 25,000 dead. These were Japan's most experienced mariners, men who had navigated these treacherous waters for decades, their knowledge and skill irreplaceable. By war's end, some ships were crewed by desperate teenagers and elderly men, thrust into maritime roles with no prior experience, a testament to the nation's dwindling human resources. Families of these merchant sailors faced a particular anguish. Unlike combat deaths, which carried a certain honor and public recognition, mining deaths seemed random, meaningless, devoid of any heroic narrative. Testimonies collected by the Japanese government reveal that families often received notices stating only "lost at sea." There was no glory in being killed by an unseen enemy while performing the prosaic but vital task of carrying rice. By July 1945, Japan's cities were not just struggling, they were dying. Records from the Tokyo metropolitan government paint a picture of utter desperation. The capital's population, swollen by refugees fleeing bombed-out areas, consumed its last meager rice reserves. The black market price for rice soared to 100 times the official rate, a cruel indicator of value in a collapsing economy. People traded precious family heirlooms, kimonos, antique swords, ancestral porcelain, for a handful of sweet potatoes. In Osaka, medical reports submitted to the occupation authorities detailed hospitals performing surgery without anesthetic, none having arrived from pharmaceutical plants. There were no bandages, no basic medicines. Patients succumbed to infections that penicillin could have cured in days, but no ships brought medicine. Education ministry records show that school lunch programs, which had often provided the one reliable meal daily for countless children, ceased entirely in May 1945. Teachers reported students fainting from hunger during lessons. Some schools closed altogether, not just for lack of food for students, but for lack of coal for heating and transportation for teachers. The mining campaign created a catastrophic cascade of failures throughout Japan's economy. Factories, deprived of coal, could not produce. Without production, workers were not paid. Without pay, they could not buy the little food that was available. Without food, they could not work. It was a vicious, self-perpetuating cycle of collapse. Company records reveal that the Nagasaki shipyards, once the proud builders of the battleship Musashi, employed 30,000 workers in January 1945. By July, a mere 3,000 remained. The rest had been dismissed or had fled to the countryside in a desperate, often futile, search for sustenance. Those remaining produced nothing. No steel, no coal, no purpose beyond mere survival. Even sake production, a culturally vital industry for morale, ceased entirely. Brewing industry records show that the Gekkeikan Brewery in Kyoto, an institution operating since 1637, shut down in June 1945. No rice for brewing. No bottles from glass factories. No transportation to distribute. 3 centuries of tradition, brought to an ignominious end by unseen minds. Japan's military, frantically preparing for the anticipated American invasion, Operation Downfall, found its preparations crippled by the relentless mining campaign. Imperial General Headquarters records show that troops couldn't be deployed between islands. Ammunition, desperately needed for defensive positions, couldn't reach its intended destinations. Even the vaunted kamikaze program, the ultimate expression of fanatical resistance, was affected. Aviation fuel, crucial for these suicide missions, couldn't reach airfields. War Minister General Korochika Anami's private papers, discovered after the war, revealed the stark, desperate reality. We prepare to fight on the beaches, but our soldiers have no bullets. We promise to fight to the last man, but that man will be fighting with bamboo spears. The Japanese Army's crucial plan to transfer crack divisions from China to defend the homeland collapsed completely. Ships simply wouldn't attempt the perilous voyage. The elite Kwantung Army, Japan's best remaining fighting force, sat uselessly in Manchuria, cut off and irrelevant, while the homeland prepared for an invasion with teenage conscripts and ancient weapons. Of the 143 Japanese ships sunk by bombs, torpedoes, and mines in July 1945, American submariners accounted for less than 10%. Airmen, focusing on direct bombing, accounted for less than 10%. But for over 90%, a staggering 129 vessels, the B-29s, with their invisible cargo, had achieved what submarines, carrier aircraft, and surface fleets combined could not: complete paralysis of Japanese maritime movement. The efficiency was truly remarkable. While a typical incendiary raid required 300 B-29s dropping 2,000 tons of bombs to destroy 16 square miles of a city, a mere dozen B-29s dropping 100 tons of mines could effectively paralyze an entire port for months. It was a force multiplier of unprecedented scale, achieving strategic objectives with minimal visible effort and maximum long-term impact. The mining of Korean ports created an additional, often overlooked humanitarian crisis. Post-war UN investigations revealed that Korean forced laborers, conscripted to work in Japan, found themselves unable to return home. Japanese colonists in Korea, once part of the conquering power, couldn't evacuate. Both populations faced widespread starvation as food distribution systems collapsed entirely. The port of Hwangsan, mined in July 1945 according to U.S. Navy records, wouldn't be fully cleared until 1950, only to be mined again during the Korean War. In a chilling testament to the mine's longevity, some American mines laid in 1945 would tragically claim North Korean vessels 5 years later, a deadly legacy that persisted long after the official end of hostilities. As July gave way to August 1945, Japan faced a multifaceted, existential collapse. The Strategic Bombing Survey's analysis of Japanese shipping records showed that vessel passage through critical straits had fallen to mere fractions of peacetime levels, reaching a point of almost total cessation. The once proud nation that had launched the Pacific War with dreams of a vast empire now couldn't even manage to feed its own capital city. On August 5th, just 5 days before Japan's eventual surrender, B-29s dropped yet another 95 mines into Japanese waters. According to mission records, these silent killers were designed to continue their deadly work even after the war officially ended. Japanese records grimly show that the Kaio Maru struck one of these mines on August 20th, 5 days after the Emperor's surrender broadcast, killing 18 crew members who believed, in their hopeful hearts, that their war was finally over. While historians continue to debate the atomic bomb's precise role in Japan's surrender, the mining campaign's impact was, by all accounts, undeniable and profound. Prince Fumimaro Konoe, a former prime minister, stated after the war in testimony to occupation authorities, "The aerial mining by B-29s had been equally as effective as the B-29 attacks on Japanese industry at the closing stages of the war, when all food supplies and critical material were prevented from reaching the Japanese home islands." Even Emperor Hirohito himself, in his momentous recorded surrender speech, cited the nation's inability to continue fighting. Behind that inability lay empty stomachs, cold factories, and idle shipyards, all direct consequences of the relentless, invisible minefields. Post-war interrogations revealed Admiral Kitasaburo Nomura, former ambassador to the United States, admitting, "We could have endured the bombing. Cities can be rebuilt, but we could not endure starvation. The mines defeated us by taking away our ability to feed ourselves." It was a confession of ultimate defeat, a recognition that the true strength of a nation lies not just in its military might, but in its fundamental ability to sustain itself. Japan's surrender, however, did not end the mining tragedy. The U.S. Navy, facing its own logistical challenges, informed Japanese authorities that clearing the mines was now their responsibility. Under American supervision, Japanese minesweepers, many of them former Imperial Navy sailors, began the deadly, grueling work of clearing their own waters. The task seemed almost impossible. Many mines possessed delayed arming mechanisms that wouldn't activate for months. Others had ship count mechanisms that might patiently wait for the 100th vessel to pass before detonating. Some fiendishly combined multiple sensors, requiring specific, complex conditions to trigger. The Americans provided general locations, but not specific mine positions or types, adding another layer of danger and uncertainty. In December 1945, the Japanese mine-sweeping forces, still commanded by the stalwart Captain Kuzo Tamura, were officially transferred to the newly established 2nd Demobilization Ministry, continuing the perilous operation. These men, once proud warriors of the Imperial Navy, now worked for their defeated nation and their former occupiers. The human cost of Operation Starvation continued its grim tally long after the formal surrender. According to Japanese Maritime Safety Agency records, between August 1945 and December 1946, Japanese minesweepers lost 81 vessels and 423 men while clearing American mines. Each death was a poignant, tragic reminder of the war's lasting, insidious legacy. A quiet sacrifice in the shadow of victory. The economic impact persisted for years, a lingering wound on the nation's recovery. Insurance industry records show that ships continued to avoid certain areas despite official clearance, and insurance rates for Japanese vessels remained elevated until 1950. Some remote channels weren't fully cleared until the 1970s, when modern technology finally allowed for truly safe sweeping. Ironically, the expertise gained clearing American mines would prove invaluable. In 1950, when the Korean War erupted, many of these same Japanese minesweepers were secretly dispatched to Korea. 25 vessels and their battle-hardened crews, assembled from bases in Kure, Shimonoseki, Osaka, Otaru, Nagoya, and Niigata, formed a special mine-sweeping force, once again commanded by former Imperial Navy Captain Kuo Tamura. Several Japanese minesweepers were lost in Korean waters, their crews dying for their former enemies, a poignant and complex twist of fate. Their sacrifice remained a closely guarded secret for decades. Japan's post-war constitution strictly forbade military operations, so their deaths were officially attributed to maritime accidents. Operation Starvation revolutionized naval warfare forever. The concept of precise aerial mining, utilizing advanced aircraft navigation systems to place mines with pinpoint accuracy in specific locations, became standard doctrine for every major navy worldwide. The technology proliferated rapidly. Acoustic, magnetic, and pressure mines, once state-of-the-art American secrets, became standard components in naval arsenals across the globe. The ship count mechanisms, the delayed arming devices, and the sophisticated combination sensors pioneered in Operation Starvation appeared in Cold War minefields from the Baltic Sea to the tense waters of the South China Sea. Despite its devastating effectiveness and strategic genius, Operation Starvation remained largely unknown to the American public, relegated to the footnotes of history. There was no dramatic gun camera footage of mines detonating, no celebrated aces or heroic dogfights. Mines sinking ships in the dead of night simply made for poor propaganda compared to the dramatic, visually striking daylight carrier strikes or the fiery bomb runs over cities. The B-29 crews themselves, the unsung heroes of this invisible campaign, received little recognition. While bomber crews attacking cities became household names, the mining crews remained largely anonymous. According to Veterans Administration records, mining missions often didn't even qualify for the same combat points as conventional bombing raids. The Navy's crucial involvement was similarly overlooked. Commander Johnson and his brilliant team, who meticulously designed the mining patterns and selected the critical targets, received only minor commendations. Their monumental contribution to victory, achieved through applied mathematics and oceanography, simply lacked the visible glamour and public appeal of surface combat. The United States Strategic Bombing Survey, in its official post-war report, concluded with a powerful and often overlooked finding. Japan faced destruction twice over, once through import strangulation by mines, and again through direct bombing. The survey's most striking and controversial conclusion was this: Japan would have surrendered even if the atomic bombs had not been dropped, even if Russia had not entered the war, and even if no invasion had been planned or contemplated. This speaks volumes about the silent, relentless power of Operation Starvation. According to Japanese military assessments captured after the war, by July 1945, Japan had been forced to devote its remaining paltry shipping exclusively to essential food and salt imports, abandoning industrial raw materials entirely. It was a desperate decision that spelled economic doom regardless of any further military developments. The true magnitude of Operation Starvation can be measured in stark statistics that reveal both its chilling efficiency and its devastating impact. The mining operations involved 1,529 sorties, laying 12,135 mines, totaling 9,100 tons, across 26 minefields in 46 separate missions. This represented a mere 5.7% of the total B-29 effort. Yet, the aircraft losses were incredibly low. 15 B-29s lost to enemy action, with 103 crew members killed, a loss rate of 0.98% compared to 6% for bombing missions. The Japanese shipping losses were catastrophic: 484 ships sunk by mines, 186 damaged, for a total of 670 vessels affected. Over 250,000 tons of shipping destroyed, representing a horrifying 63% of Japan's remaining merchant fleet. The comparative effectiveness was staggering: 45 ships sunk for every B-29 lost, an average of 7.8 ships sunk per mining B-29, compared to an average of 6.92 ships sunk per submarine throughout the entire war. The economic impact was equally crushing: Shimonoseki Strait traffic reduced by 98%, Kobe shipping declining by 85%, 35 of 47 major ports closed, and 35 of 47 convoy routes abandoned. Import reduction reached 90%, coal shipments plummeted by 95%, food distribution declined by 88%, and industrial production fell by 65%. The human cost, however, remains the most poignant testament. Over 25,000 Japanese merchant marine deaths, more than 7,000 fishing boat casualties, and 423 post-war mine-clearing deaths. 10 million civilians were at risk of starvation, a catastrophe only prevented by surrender. The post-war clearing effort was immense and tragic. 2 years to clear major ports, 27 years to clear all waters, over 6,500 mines cleared, but more than 5,000 remained unaccounted for, lurking beneath the waves. 81 Japanese minesweepers were lost in the treacherous clearing operations. Operation Starvation stands as history's most successful aerial mining campaign. In just 5 months, 160 B-29s accomplished what neither submarines nor surface ships, nor even traditional bombing could achieve: the complete, systemic paralysis of Japanese maritime commerce. The campaign unequivocally proved that wars could be won not just by destroying the enemy's forces in direct combat, but by utterly destroying their ability to sustain those forces, their ability to feed their people, and their ability to function as a modern nation. The Japanese, tragically, never knew the full scope of their catastrophe until after the war. Naval headquarters stubbornly believed submarines were responsible for many of the mining losses, while the civilian government attributed them to American carrier aircraft. Even Captain Tamura, Japan's foremost mine warfare expert, didn't fully grasp until post-war interrogations that a staggering 12,135 mines had been laid by B-29s alone. In the end, Japan was defeated not primarily by invasion, not even solely by the dramatic, devastating atomic bombs, but by weapons that turned her own lifeblood, her surrounding waters, against her. The B-29s that dropped mines instead of bombs may well have killed more Japanese through starvation and economic collapse than all the celebrated fire raids combined. The story of Operation Starvation remains largely unknown because its victims died slowly, invisibly, anonymously. There is no dramatic footage of mines destroying ships at night. No famous battles were fought, just the quiet, systematic strangulation of an island nation that, in its very essence, depended on the sea for its survival. Yet, in that very invisibility lay its terrifying power. As Admiral Nimitz observed after the war, the mining campaign proved that the most effective weapons are often those the enemy never sees coming, and indeed, often never sees at all. The 670 ships destroyed by Operation Starvation took with them Japan's ability to wage war, to feed its people, and to function as a coherent nation. Each mine that detonated in the dark, unforgiving waters sent ripples of despair throughout Japanese society. Empty stomachs, cold homes, idle factories, and ultimately the agonizing path to surrender. Captain Tamura's post-war assessment stands as the campaign's most eloquent and heartbreaking epitaph. In his testimony to American interrogators, the man who had commanded Japan's entire mine-sweeping effort admitted the undeniable truth. The B-29 mining campaign had effectively starved the country, achieving through invisible weapons what visible bombs could not, the complete paralysis of an island empire. The Japanese never truly knew what hit them, and that, ultimately, was the devastating, silent point.